This program is provided by Universal Genesis.
Let's talk about a guy named Ludwig Wittgenstein. He was a philosopher and, a genius so brilliant he basically claimed to have solved philosophy completely. So he walked away and then spent the rest of his life proving his own genius wrong. It's a really interesting question, right? We usually think of geniuses as being certain, finding the answer. But Wittgenstein's story, it's all about the genius of admitting you were totally wrong. And in doing that, he ended up changing everything. So how on earth did this happen? Well, at the very heart of Wittgenstein's life is this incredible U-turn, a complete 180-degree reversal of his own ideas. It's really a story of two totally opposing philosophies, all coming from the exact same brain. On one hand, you've got the young, super confident Wittgenstein. He built this incredible tower of logic that he believed solved, well, every single problem in philosophy. Done. And on the other hand, you have the older, wiser Wittgenstein, who came to realize that philosophy wasn't about building some final, perfect structure. Nope. It was about just observing the messy, winding path of how we actually live and speak. Okay, so let's start with that first guy, the young genius. He wrote this one single, really slim book and was completely convinced he had just ended philosophy for good. So his book, the Tractatus, basically argued that all of philosophy's big problems were just illusions. He boiled it down to this. First, all our explanations have to stop somewhere, right? At the bedrock of just pure logic. Second, we only get ourselves into philosophical messes when we misuse words, when language goes on holiday, as he famously put it. And that means, third, philosophy's only real job is to be a kind of janitor for language, just cleaning up all the confusion. That's it. And he was so sure about this, so convinced, that he just walked away. And I don't mean he took a sabbatical or a research trip. He straight up quit being a philosopher. He believed there was literally nothing left for him or anyone else to do in the field. So where does a philosopher go after he's solved philosophy? For Wittgenstein, he went out into the real world. Seriously, he became a primary school teacher, a gardener, and even a hospital porter. He traded the fancy university for the messy reality of how people actually talk to each other. So he's in the classroom, and he sees that his super precise, logical explanations, they just weren't connecting with the kids. But here's the thing. They were still learning math. The logic wasn't the point. The learning was happening anyway. Then, as a gardener, he noticed that nobody needed a perfect philosophical definition of what a rake is or what soil is. A simple gesture, a kind of shared understanding, that was all it took for the work to get done, and get done well. And then, in the hospital, he saw that instructions were often pretty vague or incomplete, but the whole system, it just worked. People understood each other well enough to save lives, all without needing some kind of logically perfect language. And this was the huge revelation he had during that decade away from philosophy. His early obsession with a perfect, logical language was just a fantasy. He realized that out here, in the real world, language is messy, it's incomplete, it's imperfect, and yet it works beautifully. It's enough. So, armed with this totally new understanding, Wittgenstein goes back to Cambridge a decade later. But he wasn't there to give them some new grand theory. No, he was there with a new mission, to observe, not to solve. He realized he needed dialogue. He needed partners to play a new kind of game with, to test his observations about how language actually works, not how it's supposed to work in some perfect, logical world. He had to see if these new ideas made sense to other people too. And nothing, I mean nothing, shows how much he changed more than this story about his return. So, to get his job back at Cambridge, he had to submit a PhD thesis. And what does he submit? His old book, the Tractatus. And then, during the defense, he reportedly claps his examiners on the shoulder and just says, "Don't worry, I know you'll never understand it." He was already playing a completely different game. So this led him to his huge, central idea from his later work, the language game. He started arguing that language isn't just a pile of words. No, it's the entire context, the actions, the situation, the unspoken rules of the road. A doctor giving an order and a kid asking for a toy. They might use some of the same words, but they are playing two completely different language games. So here's the crucial point. We don't just use language, we do things with it. It's an activity. It's a practice we all engage in. It's a game we play with each other, and the rules change depending on where we are and what we're doing. So this totally new perspective led him to a set of core observations that just completely blew up his early philosophy. So let's break down the new rules of his game. First, and this is the most famous one, meaning is use. He argued that a word's meaning isn't some abstract definition you look up in a dictionary or some perfect idea floating around in your head. The meaning of a word is simply how it's used in a particular language game. That's it. This is it, plain and simple. I mean, think about the word game itself. What's the one single definition that covers chess and soccer and a toddler playing peekaboo? There isn't one, right? We know what game means by how we use it in all these different situations. The use is the meaning. And from this one powerful idea, everything else just flows. Using language isn't just about describing things. It's about acting. We order things. We ask questions. We comfort people. And since meaning is built through all of us using it together, language has to be fundamentally social. And that's why he argued there can be no such thing as a private language, because a word only gets its meaning when it's part of a game played between people. So this whole lifelong investigation, this great big reversal, it brings us to the end of his journey, both as a philosopher and as a person. You see, his second great book, Philosophical Investigations, it was actually published after he died. And it doesn't have a big conclusion or a final chapter. And that's the whole point. It's just a collection of his observations, a record of his process. Because for the later Wittgenstein, philosophy wasn't about finding an end. It was about the act of looking. Now, despite a life that was filled with a lot of internal struggle, Wittgenstein's reported last words were, "Tell them I've had a wonderful life." Not that he'd solved everything, not that he was perfectly happy, but that the game itself, the communication, the attempt to be understood, that was enough. And that really leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? We spend so much time chasing perfect communication and we agonize over being misunderstood. But Wittgenstein's great reversal kind of suggests a different goal. What if the whole point isn't to be understood perfectly, but just to be understood at all? To just play that shared, messy, and ultimately wonderful game of trying to connect with each other.
This program is provided by Universal Genesis.